Hey, Mac, we're going live right now. Who do you want to do a shout out to?
Uh, to all the weirdos out there that were like me that are going, what do I do with all this weird? And then you find out that you're on a show talking about it.
Awesome. All the weirdos, here we go together. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be weird today with Mac Beauvais. We're talking with Mac, the Green Witch. Mac's mission is to help end the stigma around cannabis while working to support marginalized communities in the space. I am excited about this. Mac, we're going to be weirdos together today. How about that?
I like it. Let's do
Okay.
it.
We're going to be talking about two big things today. One, we're going to be talking about cannabis. Two, we're going to be talking about witchcraft and witches, maybe not in that order. And we put you've put the two together, and you've come up with weird and scary comes out to be super cool and super good. So let's talk about. We'll just start with it. What is witchcraft, and why is it scary to people?
Well, witchcraft is very personal. So a lot of people will say, like, you have to do it this way or you have to be that way when it comes to your practice. But really, it's up to you. But for me, it's really about looking within and finding a spirituality outside of yourself without necessarily having to attribute it to one thing or another directly. I like to light incense and candles and set intentions and um, look within, and I do a lot of tarot card reading. That's one of my main focuses when it comes to things in the witchcraft sphere.
And when you talk about cannabis now, we're going to pretend that most of the people who are watching the show probably don't do cannabis all the time or on a regular basis. Why is cannabis scary?
It's been demonized for a very long time, the same way that witchcraft has been, in that we've been told it's bad and it leads to all this, and don't do drugs, kids, and you're going to get offered weed at every turn throughout your life, which is not the case. At least it wasn't for me. Um, but it's been treated as this, scary thing that will make you go crazy, and don't try it even once.
Right. So when you actually go and you combine these two things, you get something amazing. And I know you just talked about your fact that you do tarot readings, and when I was talking with you in the green room before, you mentioned that you use cannabis to help with your tarot readings. How does that work for you?
Yeah, so I actually offer a service called Token Tarot, where it's a smoke session combined with a tarot reading, but I do it for myself in my personal life as well. I have a lot of inner chatter, especially because I have a pretty extreme anxiety disorder and uh, neurodivergency. And it helps me relax and come to a headspace where I'm able to really be more the words are hard. It's still early here.
It's all good because
Uh,
we're all weirdos together today.
Yes. But be more objective about what I'm seeing in the cards and be a little bit more free-minded and a little bit more easy to make those connections. It really does help make it easier to connect.
Gotcha. So a lot of people, you do tarot, and whether or not people believe in the cards or believe in tarot or not, they may have a hard time going like, well, now you're reading the tarot, but now you're high reading tarot. Tell us how it affects you when you're actually doing tarot.
Like I said, it really makes me more open, especially when I'm reading for other people, because I get uh socially anxious. So it helps me get to a more level place where I'm able to communicate with people. And if they're also high, it makes them a little bit more receptive to talking to a stranger, because tarot is a lot like a weird mini therapy session for a lot of people, where you're looking for answers and you're coming to somebody that you don't know to help provide those answers. And it
So
really is phenomenal.
when you talk about tarot, the connection there, and I agree. I think sometimes tarot is definitely like a therapy session for people. What is it that I guess cannabis is a psychedelic, and there's a connection between the psychedelic. The Indians have used psychedelics when they were doing readings and stuff. What is it that you see more of when you're doing the psychedelics versus non-psychedelic reading of tarot?
Um, Honestly, sometimes the cards jump out in different ways. Sometimes smaller elements on the cards might strike me in a way that it hasn't before. It lets me see them in a more fluid sense instead of the static, this card means this and this card means this. Sometimes I get more intuition and I have more information to relay than I would were I sober reading cards.
Gotcha. So in general, let's talk about just cannabis. Let's go back a little bit. We've talked about different types of cannabis. I believe we've talked about indica is one form, right?
Mhm.
And then we've have the stevia is another form.
Sativas.
Sativa, sorry.
Mhm.
Um, Talk about the difference there and why people might want to use either of those different forms and which ones you use.
So just to start, honestly, all cannabis is technically hybrids. There are not any existing strains of pure sativa or indica left. They're really monikers that are more related to how a strain makes you feel than it is biologically how they're broken down. But indicas tend to be a little more heavy, a little more sleepy, more couch locky, relaxing, and hit your body a lot more. Sativas tend to be more of a head high, so they're more energetic, they're a little bit more stimulating. And I stick to sativas. I find indicas trigger panic attacks for me because I feel like my body is so heavy that it feels like how my panic attacks manifest. So I stick to sativas. Plus, I prefer sort of the cerebral head high when it comes to cannabis.
Gotcha. And I noticed that the governments are now starting to get into the cannabis industry so that they can actually monitor it like they do with alcohol, right? What's your overall feeling about that?
Well, I think it's good and bad. In some ways, it's really good because it's opening things up. It's making it more available for people. It's making it less scary and easier to try. But it also can lead to things becoming more homogenized. And in a lot of cases, especially marginalized communities, are not getting a chance to put their mark on the space because the government's getting involved and people with a lot of money who maybe don't need to also be running cannabis in this country are getting the first shot at really setting up uh, this initial industry on a federal level.
Gotcha. You talk about marginalized communities. When you talk about them, who are you reaching out to? Who do you mean?
I mean, I think it's especially the Black communities that are suffering the most. They've suffered the most historically when it comes to the legislation in getting, locked up and persecuted for having marijuana, and then
Mhm.
having a hard time starting businesses after that when they were more familiar with it than anybody else because they're what they call like legacy, so people that have been in marijuana before it was legalized in that area, and they usually hold a lot more knowledge, but they get less grants and less opportunities in the space to have their own little piece of it.
When you started the Can of Coven, and you've got your business going, what did you have to jump through in terms of hoops to make things go?
Fortunately, not too much, just because I'm not actually selling cannabis itself. I have dealt with some weirdness though over it. I can't promote on social media the same way that I would like to because it could get flagged very easily. PayPal shut me down as a payment service because it was cannabis related, even though I wasn't selling anything illegal. I had to be really careful about, even with Token Tarot, making sure that I had all of the legal jargon in place for terms of service and everything to make sure that I wasn't going to get in trouble for offering this service.
I can tell you from my experience with Facebook is that if you're in any of the what they want to call adult or industries, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and I work with a lot of psychics, it's hard, you know, and it doesn't matter if you say it's for entertainment purposes or whatever, you get hammered by them. So you've got
Oh
kind of a
yeah.
double whammy going with the cannabis and the witchcraft on both of those.
Yeah, I never take the easy route on anything.
I don't know what you're talking about. Th- There you go. Yeah. No, I think it's really kind of a shame that people don't have their minds more open to being just even listening to what you're talking about or what we're talking about here right now. Um, what's some of the things that you hope to see change over the course of, legislation?
Well, it needs to be federally legal. It needs to be legalized across the board. It needs to be much easier to get medical cards for those of us that are using it as medicine. I use it to help treat my disorders, and getting a medical card even now is really difficult to find a doctor in a legal state that will give me a medical card. Um, but it needs to be where things are a little more stable across the board. Like, I don't want things to become too homogenized where every store it's just the same thing, but we do need to have some regularity across states and the offerings so that when people do start to experiment and do jump into that, it's not a hodgepodge. Like, you know what you're getting into, sort of, if you go and buy alcohol, you've got the APV and like all of that kind of stuff. Um, you need to have standards so that people understand what they're taking in, what they're ingesting, and the research needs to really increase as well on being able to break down all of that information for people.
How do you think it is that people look at alcohol and say it's okay, but cannabis is not?
I don't understand that, especially because nobody dies from cannabis. Like, there's a couple of outlying cases, I'm sure a few people will bring up of like this happened or that happened, but it's usually not. You don't get marijuana poisoning. You get real high. You may not feel very good for a bit if you get overly high, but then it goes away and you're fine.
Yeah. When people first try cannabis, is it something they need to try alone with a friend in a party setting? How do you suggest they get involved with?
Oh, I always think it's best to be with another person, especially if you are experiencing something so new that you might feel you're sick or something's wrong. It can ramp up emotions. So having, a safe environment, having somebody that you trust, being in a good mood.
Mhm.
Sometimes the worst times to engage in cannabis are when you're already in a real dour place or you're watching something really heavy on TV. Just set the actual mood for the experience that you want to have, and that's going to help you have that experience.
Gotcha. Should people try the edibles first or smoke?
I would say, and this may sound kind of weird to a lot of people, I would say smoking first. And here's the reason: smoke is going to be easier for you to regulate how much you're having of it. So you can tell because you're getting an immediate feedback from your body of, I am getting high and this is what I'm feeling, and you can stop. An edible, once it's in your system, you have to wait till it activates. You have to know what the dosage is, when you ate last, what did you eat last, and once the edibles in your system and once it kicks in, you're in for the ride. There isn't a real grace period of, I mean, you could be high for hours. You could be uncomfortably high for hours. I've had some times where I'm like, I'm so high, I'm like, I'm going to vibrate through the walls because I'm so high and it's uncomfortable.
Gotcha. So one of the things that if you said to somebody right now, okay, I practice this witchcraft, I'm into cannabis, and I want to teach you about things and why they're good for you, what would you tell somebody in general to get your message across?
Um, I mean, first of all, I'd be like, why are you scared of this thing? Like, let's really break it down and understand where your fears are coming from so that we can tackle that and really break it apart. Because once you start having those conversations and really discussing with people what their preconceived notions are of things, you'll find pretty quickly that they've just had input from one side and they just haven't had any other reality presented to them.
I want people to be able to get in touch with you and ask you questions and learn more about the witchcraft, more and more about cannabis. Let's put up some of your the best way, I think, to get in touch with you is probably through your website.
Yeah, absolutely. Greenwitchcoven.com is easy to find some articles that I've put up that are very no nonsense articles about getting started with cannabis and some of the lingo and things that you need to get started in at all. I have the token tarot service on there. And then I also have some products that are a mix of the witchcraft and cannabis theme, including my favorite. I have toke wands, which are joint holders, fancy little joint holders
Uh,
that make passing joints around more fun, make it easier to hold for yourself, and just make you feel fancy.
I got you. And we also want to be able to um, show people your social feeds. Which one of those is actually the best one?
Oh, the best one. I don't know. I've been trying to ramp back up into things. I just moved recently, so it's always shakes things up. But probably Instagram is the easiest way to get a hold of me at this
Okay,
point.
excellent. And you know what? I have to ask you one question here. I was going to ask you later, but I have to ask you right now. Um, if you had a wish for the world, just any wish for the world at all, what would it be?
Oh man, a wish for the world. Uh I just wish people were more open-minded, and okay, here's my wish for the world. I think everybody should try psychedelics once because I think everybody needs to understand what it feels like, understand that it's not what you think it is, and almost everybody I've ever talked to that's even done them once, it opens up a lot of truths about the universe that you may not have had otherwise. It just changes your point of view because you're taking the reality and just turning it up a notch. And I think it's a useful experience for people. It's more than just, oh, I'm going to get on the marijuanas or the LSDs and sit and watch Studio Ghibli films. It's more than that. It really does make you think in ways that you don't expect and opens a lot of doors, I think.
I think that's fabulous. Thank you for that. And I cannot wait to talk to you again. Thank you so much. And I guess I got to say, we out. Bye,
All right.
everybody.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.